Hey everybody, this is Mr. Storm, and in this lesson we're going to talk about operating systems. This is a term you've probably heard before, but we're going to explore exactly what that means in this lesson. So here are our learning objectives for this lesson. We want to select and or use the following words effectively and productively: windows, folders, files, shortcuts, install, uninstall, run, and solve common problems. So we're going to learn what all those words mean. And again, these are words you've probably heard before, but we're going to dig really deeply into what each of those mean. We also want to learn how to use an operating system to manipulate a computer's desktop, the files, and the disks that we will find there. We also want to understand file directories and file extensions and their associations. So, what is an operating system? Well, it's the piece of software that manages almost everything on your computer. Right? So when someone says something like, I'm using a Windows computer, or I'm using a Mac computer, or a Linux computer, they're referring to the operating system itself. Now, in some cases, like for Mac, they might be referring to the entire platform, because Mac computers are all also produced or manufactured by Apple as well. So the OS and the computer are manufactured together. Whereas with Windows, you can put Windows on really any computer, and the same thing goes for Linux as well. Now, the operating system is kind of like the personality of your computer, right? It's how your computer looks when you're using it. It dictates how your files are managed. It dictates security things and all the systems and all the stuff. It's basically the entire personality of your computer. So let's talk about Windows and the Windows file system specifically, because with Windows, Windows is the computer you're going to use the most, right? So this is what a Windows file system generally looks like, right? You have a window, which is a container on the screen that displays information for a specific program. So this is a window here, right? You also have a folder, which would be this. It's a collection of related files that can be retrieved, moved, and otherwise manipulated as one. So you'll put files into a folder. Now, a file is just an entity of data available to the user, which can come in many different types. So for example, this file it's a picture file. It's a JPEG file of Deadpool riding on Iron Man's back. That is a file, and files can go into folders. Okay, and then we have shortcuts, which is a copy of a file or a folder put in a more convenient place. Notice that on the desktop back here in this picture, there are icons with a little arrow. That arrow indicates that that is a shortcut. That shortcut will go back to another place in the file system, meaning this application doesn't live on the desktop. It lives somewhere else. This is just a shortcut to find where it lives. Okay. Let's talk about directories. So operating systems handle the file storage for your computer, right? And every operating system handles file storage a bit differently. We're going to talk about how Windows does it. So in Windows, you store your files into drives, or we can call them directories or drives. Windows distinguishes between your drives using letters. So the first drive on your computer, or the main drive that you're always going to see on a Windows computer, is the C drive. The C drive is where your operating system's files are stored. And then you have other drives that you can expand, or other drives that you can use by plugging in external hard drives, or installing other hard drives, or plugging in a flash drive, or putting a CD in the DVD-ROM, or putting a CD in the DVD and the optical drive. So if we take a look here at this screenshot, we have our C drive. This tells me that I have 22.6 gigs available on the C drive. We have a DVD-RW drive, which is full. It has a CD in it already. We have a Blu-ray drive, which has nothing in it. We have an F drive, which is an expanded hard drive. There's more files there. There's a storage drive, which is almost full, which is why it's red. And then we have an H drive with a bunch of free space. That's 2 terabytes, or no, almost a third of a terabyte and some change of free space there. So you can change the actual directory or letters if you'd like. You can actually split a drive into 2 separate directories if you'd like. There are all kinds of things you can do with directories. But whenever someone says directory, essentially they're talking about a drive. Let's talk about file extensions. So file extensions are really important in Windows because if the file extension is incorrect or if it doesn't match, then you won't be able to tell the computer won't be able to tell which application it needs to use in order to open the file. So for example, files are always named in this format, right? There's a name, so my file, and then there's a period, and then there's an extension after the period. The extension can be something like XLSX, which is for Microsoft Excel documents, or JPG, which is a JPEG, which is a picture file, or TXT, which is a basic text file, or DOCX, which is a Microsoft Word file. So there are a lot of different kinds of file types out there. There's .pdf, .avi, .exe, .whatever, right? And if you change that file extension, if you rename it, make it something else, Windows won't recognize how to open that file anymore, and you might have to change it back in order to get your file to work again. So again, Windows gives you the opportunity to change file extensions. Do not do it unless you understand what you're doing. Now, if Windows doesn't recognize a file extension, you can actually change how Windows treats specific file extensions. For example, with this screenshot, you can choose which program you want to open your .txt files. You can use Notepad or WordPad or any other application that could handle that kind of file. So that is an option you have. Okay, now let's talk about how to install applications. So applications need to be installed to your computer in order to be used. Now, there is a very big exception to this. If you're using an application that runs primarily on the internet, you may not need to install it at all. But if you want to run an application on your computer, you need to install it. Usually this is done by finding a setup file that usually has a .exe file extension. And when you click on that setup file, a wizard will pop up, not a real wizard, but a file setup wizard or an application install wizard will pop up that will allow you to click through the options and install your application. Be careful though. Some applications will try to trick you into installing like these browser add-ons or little programs that are going to be, that are going to cause all kinds of problems in your computer. Take your time when you're clicking through the install options and make sure you uncheck things that you don't want. Uninstalling. So you can also get rid of applications that you do not want to use anymore. So you can uninstall unwanted applications through the control panel and through apps and I believe it's called apps and whatever. But you can uninstall applications there. It's important to remember that you cannot just go into the file system and delete all the files that make up that application, because there will still be little extra files that you can't see hanging around, and it'll cause problems in your system. You have to actually uninstall applications in order for them to go away completely. Now let's talk about moving files. So you can move files all around. You can move them from one directory to another. You can move files within the same directory. You can create copies of files and then have two different versions of that file in two different places. There are all kinds of things you can do. Now, if you're moving a file from one directory to another, Windows will automatically create a copy of that file in the new directory, but it will hold on to that original file. If you're moving a file from one place in a directory to another place in that same directory, it will not automatically create a copy. Copy and cut. So you can copy files by right-clicking on the file, select copy, and then you can paste it into the new location. Now, Windows will not allow files with the same name to exist in the same folder. So Windows will default by giving it like a parentheses at the end of the file name and putting a 1 in there if you have two files of the same name. Delete. So you can delete files specifically, but if you right-click and then select delete, or if you hit the delete key, that file doesn't go away forever. It doesn't go away automatically. It goes into the recycle bin. Now, you can recover files from your recycle bin. You can go into the recycle bin and you can restore that item back to where it originally lived, if it can find its way back there. You can also delete files out of the recycle bin. You can empty the recycle bin, which does actually get rid of the files for good. Searching files. So, not searching, selecting. So if you hold Shift while you are clicking on files, it will select a range. So for example, if I hold Shift and I select this SES1 prices, this first file, and I come down to the bottom while holding Shift and click the bottom one, it'll select all of the files in that range. Now, if I hold Control instead, I can select individual files in the list, just like this, right? You see I have these 5 files selected. That's because I was holding Control when I clicked them, okay? So there are 2 ways to select files. All right, and that is pretty much it. I mean, there's a lot more we can talk about, but for our purposes for today, that's generally what you really need to know. The more you use a computer's operating system, the more comfortable you get with moving files around and how it manages all of the important functions of a computer, the better you will be able to use that operating system in the future. And quite frankly, the harder it will be to learn a new operating system whenever you move over to another one. I'm primarily a Windows guy, and I use Linux as well because I teach Cyber Patriot and we use Linux there. I am absolutely useless on a Mac computer. That's something I need to learn a lot more of, but I don't own a Mac, so I don't use them very often. So my advice is to use as many computers as you can, get used to how they work, and understand how different operating systems work. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. So thank you for paying attention, and I will see you next time.